The Grand Tour has always felt like a show with something to prove. The famous trio of presenters didn't want to do Top Gear but again, and because of that, the Grand Tour really struggled with finding its identity in its first season. But many, like myself, were just happy the iconic trio of Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond were doing what they do best, making a fun car show. So it's fitting that just as the Grand Tour arose from the ashes of Top Gear, its video game adaptation, aptly named The Grand Tour the Game, features developers who rose from the ashes of Criterion and Ghost Games. Not that those studios are gone, but they definitely aren't in peak form. Now, there's the ambiguously named Amazon Game Studios. It's unclear how many teams are within Amazon Game Studios or if the entire staff worked on this game, but I digress. The point is that if anyone is qualified to work on a racing game, it's developers who have worked on games like Burnout and Need for Speed. At the end of the day though, this is a licensed TV show tie-in game, and history has shown us that tie-in games have a tendency to be pretty hit or miss, with a higher likelihood of missing than hitting. Does the Grand Tour the game carve out its own identity as something special, or is it destined to fade into the annals of history as yet another ill-conceived licensed tie-in game?
3, 2, 1, away! Yes! This is absolutely brilliant.
Undoubtedly, the most unique aspect of the Grand Tour the game is its presentation that results from the game's situation as a TV show tie-in. The game doesn't even try to render the show's hosts as uncanny character models with half-baked voice work recorded specifically for the game. No, the Grand Tour the game is a hybrid between TV show and game, and not in the way Quantum Break did it. Rather than having a stretch of gameplay followed by an entire TV episode, here's how the Grand Tour the game works. It plays a relatively trimmed down version of one of the show's episodes, and anytime there's an action scene or a race, it hands the controls over to the player, and they reenact the sequence from the show. Not only that, but as of the time of publishing this review, Amazon Game Studios is still adding new episodes every week, timed with the release of each new episode of the Grand Tour on Amazon. So, with each new episode of the show, there's a new episode in the game. It's a pretty fascinating experiment, and one that Amazon was in a unique position to try out. I think it pays off well, too. Whenever I'm watching a new episode of Season 3 and see something cool, I can't stop myself from thinking about how fun that would be to play in the game. However, its unique presentation is also a hindrance after a while. It definitely works better with old episodes I haven't seen in a while because I find myself skipping through the live action sections during the Season 3 episodes more than I did for Seasons 1 and 2. If I'm just coming off watching the episode, there's no real reason to watch nearly the entire thing all over again. And when you don't skip the show parts of the episodes, it becomes clear just how few game parts there are in comparison. Without skipping, you're going to be watching more than playing. So if you aren't a fan of lengthy sections between gameplay, it's definitely going to be a problem. Also, while Season 3 will have an in-game episode for every episode of the show, Seasons 1 and 2 each only have one episode on tap, the first ones. However, they did manage to squeeze in one car review from an earlier season in place of one from Season 3 due to Amazon Game Studios being unable to secure the license of the McLaren Senna for the game. In its place, they put in the review of the McLaren 720S. It's unfortunate, but I think they did the right thing by being transparent with the player. But despite the transparency, I can't help but wonder why they even bothered including those sections of the episodes if they couldn't go all the way with them, especially since they had no issues replicating certain elements that had nothing to do with the cars, such as the photography from Season 3's Columbia special. The gameplay itself is surprisingly solid. Like any racing game, it takes a little while to get used to, but it's easy to tell that Amazon Game Studios tried their hardest to make the Grand Tour of the game as accessible as possible. It's remarkably simple. It's just gas, brake, handbrake, and power-ups. I was actually amazed at how easy it was to acclimate to the controls, and how soon I began to do some pretty flashy stuff. It's not a sim by any means, like I said before. These are the guys and gals who made Burnout and Need for Speed, not Gran Turismo, but it's not trying to be anything else. The multiplayer even features Mario Kart-esque power-ups that pull from certain gags and moments from the show, like blasting obnoxious music through your enemy's speakers or texting opponents to slow them down. It adds a comedic element consistent with the tone of the show while also adding to the chaotic potential of racing with friends. Unfortunately, there's no online multiplayer as of the writing of this review, so for now, you're stuck with the AI and or your friends. A huge oversight in my opinion. It would definitely add to the replayability of the game, since once you get all of the gold medals in the episodes, there's no real reason to come back to this game. It's also disappointing that there's no alternate camera options. There's also a fair share of technical hiccups in the Grand Tour of the game. The frame rate dips rather frequently, most often when transitioning from real footage to in-engine gameplay. I've had the game crash on me, and I've experienced infinite loading screens when loading up a quick race. I was also disappointed with the lack of visual variety. While the gameplay itself has a ton of variation and diversity, within one episode, one track will get reused many times. In fact, some of the challenges boil down to doing the exact same thing, just in 3 different cars that handle almost identically to each other.
set is by far the cleverest of the 3 cars here.
The final issue worth mentioning is something you'll only encounter if you're hunting for gold medals. The player is ranked for their performance in each gameplay section from bronze to gold. There's no real reason to go for gold unless you're hunting for trophies, but in the event that you do go for these medals, you'll be hindered by the fact that the game replays a small section of the live action footage rather than just putting the player right back into the action. It felt like playing an RPG from 2006 where you're forced to rewatch an unskippable cutscene every time you go fight a difficult boss. With all that said, it's hard to recommend this game to anyone who's not starving for an arcade racing game or anyone who's not a big fan of the Grand Tour. While it did satisfy my arcade racing game itch and will continue to do so until Season 3 is finished, it is by no means a great game. It's an average game that has an interesting hook that it succeeds in executing on. If you're interested in this game, chances are you'll like it. If you're not interested, the Grand Tour of the game isn't going to do anything that will change your mind. It's not a miss by any means, but it's not really a hit either.
Evil wins! Evil wins!